I wanted to quickly jump into the panel. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking because the experts are here with me, but we've got Kim Norwesh up in the upper right corner waving, and we've got Matt Johanson in the bottom left from Discover, and Melanie Tinto from WEX. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but thank you all for attending this panel. I really appreciate you participating. So again, thank you so much. So with that, Kim, if you'll start just a couple of minutes on yourself, your background, who you work for, and what they do, that'd be great.
Thanks, Greg. I'm super excited to be here, part of the D&I panel. Special thanks to you for being a leader, creating this Leader in Payment podcast and this whole series. So very excited to be part of this. I am new to the payments industry. I joined NMI as their first Chief People Officer earlier this year. So for those that don't know NMI, it is a leading global payments enablement tech company. And we are growing and evolving so fast. I'm super excited to be part of this industry. It's just evolving at lightning speed. My prior experience, I've had over 20 years of HR leadership experience, primarily in biotech, pharma, sort of big company, public, and then also startup and smaller company. In the last 4.5 years, I've been in tech. I have a bit of an unusual background for HR. I went to West Point, I had an engineering undergrad, and I served in the military. And part of the thing that really got me into HR was that Army experience and really working with diverse teams and for a common mission. And that's really what inspired me to get in HR and why I'm so passionate about the D&I space.
Okay, Matt, over to you. Can you hear me, Matt?
To me? I'm sorry, Greg.
Yes. Yeah, nope, your turn.
I can. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So my name again is Matt Johanson. I'm with Discover Financial Services, who hopefully you all know. We are the consumer-facing digital bank. Our flagship product, of course, is the Discover card. But we also operate the Discover network in the U.S. and Diners Club International globally on the network side of our business. I've been at Discover for 25 years. My joke is I've gotten a chance to work on everything but the plumbing in those 25 years. My background originally was in technology. Then I spent 14 years in our payments business, where amongst other things, I ran our acquirer relations group for several years, which would be many of kind of with many. In the last 4 years, I've been in enterprise roles, in the last 2 in HR. Obviously, I'm not an HR practitioner by any means, kind of the opposite background from Kim, but have in the last, I guess since August, have focused entirely on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I like to say is only the second job I've asked for in my 25 years at Discover, and it's by far the most rewarding work I've done. So great to be here with you all.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. So Melanie, on to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Melanie Tinto, and I am the Chief Human Resources Officer at WEX. And WEX is a technology service provider in the payment space particularly. And we operate across several sectors. We operate across fleet, travel, corporate payments, and health. And if you've ever used a gas card or have a health savings account card in your wallet, or perhaps if you book travel on an online travel site, you've likely used one of our products at some point in time. And I've been with WEX now for a little over 3 years, focused solely in HR in that time. Prior to that, I worked across several different sectors and industries, retail, financial services, tech, and spent much of my time in talent management, also spent time as a chief learning officer, focused on succession, performance management, all the key areas of HR. In addition, I spent time in product strategy and actually started out my career in accounting. So I think I'm a combination of the other 2 panelists today. So it should be a great conversation. And this is a passionate space for me from a diversity and inclusion perspective. So I'm really excited to be for this today.
Great. Thank you so much. Kim, I'm going to ask you the first question. We did have a little difficulty hearing you, Kim. I don't know If maybe the rest of the speakers can mute whenever they're not speaking, that might help. And I don't know, Kim, if you can get a little closer to the speaker, maybe. Not sure that was it, but I know someone had an issue and then they logged back in and could hear better. So hopefully it'll be better this time. But the first question for you, Kim, is can you briefly talk about the kind of D&I or DE&I programs that NMI has in place right now, and sort of what's the focus on improving that aspect of the business? And actually, we're going to go around with the same question for all three, but Kim, if you don't mind starting out answering that question.
Yeah, for sure. Can you hear me okay?
That seems to be a little better.
Okay, I'm hoping so. Otherwise, I'll have to log in and out, but I think we'll just go with this. So at NMI, we have a people-first culture, and we believe that innovation and our success is really based on having diverse and talented people with different opinions, different experiences, and backgrounds. And so, as I think about what we're doing at NMI, there's a quote that I really love whenever we talk about DEI with our employees. It's from Verna Myers, and I'm sure many of you know Verna Myers, a leader on the DEI front, and it's my favorite quote. And it just really talks about diversity is being asked to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance. At NMI, we're definitely focused on both. We're a growing company, and so we're hiring a ton, so recruiting is a big initiative for us. And we've set goals in areas around more women and Black engineers. We are building a pipeline of diverse talent, partnering with a number of diverse organizations. We use diverse interns working with Year Up. I don't know if those people are familiar with that program. It's a great program. And then the other thing on the recruiting front that I'm really excited about that we're doing at NMI is we're removing bias out of our early screening process by enabling blinded resumes. And that's something really exciting because technology has not caught up with the need. And finally, our applicant tracking companies have caught up, and they allow us to do it pretty easily. So I'm really excited about that. And then on the other side of the inclusive side of things, being asked to the dance, we're really focused on building inclusive teams, and we've launched 2 groups at NMI, one a women's network, and it's focused on bringing all the women of NMI together and really supporting each other as a community, helping with develop them, and working on hiring as well. And then we also launched a DEI council to really shape our initiatives for DEI at NMI. And that's something that we just started this year. And, and I think that the last thing I would say that we're doing at NMI is just getting feedback from our employees on how we're doing with either engagement surveys, and also just, we work with this third party called Bleecker in the UK, and they help us do anonymous focus groups on a periodic basis, which has been really helpful as well.
Great.
So lots going on. There's more to share, but I think those are the top line things.
Great. Thanks, Kim. That was great. So, Matt, your turn. Same question. What kind of programs does Discover have, and what are ways that you're focusing on improving, your D&I at Discover?
Sure. I'm going to feel bad for Melanie here, as I think Kim and I both talk. We're going to take a lot of the top things. So, at Discover, we just established last fall 4 North Star goals for our DE&I efforts. First is around diversity, and that's to have 50% female and 40% people of color in our leadership ranks. Think about kind of the top 500 for our enterprise. On an inclusion front, it's really to have equal inclusion scores when we ask about belonging and respect and opportunity for all identity groups. Third is around equity. We just want to make sure that we have no disparate outcomes in any of our talent processes for any identity groups. And then finally, fourth is around external impact. It's really kind of leveraging our platform, the tens of thousands of jobs we have, the billions of dollars of supplier spend, tens of millions of dollars of charitable contributions, and these amazing financial products, right? And really doing more with those for our communities. And so we have some, many of the things, that Kim mentioned that we're doing as well. But on the diversity front, probably our biggest thing right now, we're even a little bit behind Kim on blind resumes. We're just now implementing diverse candidate slates, diverse interview panels, and developing new development programs for our Black and Latinx pipeline of talent. On the inclusion front, we've never had anti-bias training at Discover. So this is the first year. So we have enterprise-wide training ambitions, including a deliberate advocate training that just went out to all employees, and expert assessment and personal coaching at the most senior levels of the company. On the equity front, we're focused on creating kind of pay equity level measurement systems for all of our talent flows. When we talk about diversity, it's hiring, it's promotion, and it's retention, right, that are maintaining those. So we want to do the same level that we look at pay equity. We want to look at the equity in each of those flows as well. And then finally, on external impact, which is where I spend the majority of my time, we just announced last month that we're going to open a new contact center, customer contact center on the south side of Chicago, which is our hometown. But we're going to bring 1,000 jobs there into a community that kind of needs it the most, and really focus on driving economic opportunity into not just a community that has really experienced de-investment over the last several decades, but also has been hit in an outsized way by the pandemic, and really focus on helping with that recovery.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Melanie, same question for you.
Great, thanks. And I'll try and add on some different pieces, but there may be some overlap as well with Kim and Matt. So with our diversity strategy in particular, we focused on several pillars. We focused on workforce, workplace, community, partnerships, and marketplace. And in those particular pillars, we've made sure that we focused on a few things specifically programmatically. One is our employee resource groups, with both Kim and Matt have mentioned. And those have been a driving force for us, not only to make sure that we're continuing to build our culture at WEX, but also to make sure that we're really driving a culture of belonging, a sense of belonging across all of our employees. And that's something we started a couple of years ago on our growth journey at WEX, and it continues to really blossom around the world, which has been terrific to see. In addition, we work on, what is our philanthropic efforts that we focus on? So how do we make sure we're continuing to drive philanthropy in those particular areas that we believe are critically important in building inclusion and building diversity within our communities that we live and serve and work, and with our partnerships and with our customers as well. We also focus in particularly internally in training on unconscious bias. And I think everyone's also focused on unconscious bias as well, which is the awareness training to make sure that all of our employees understand what is it, how does it affect the decisions that an employee makes, and why is it important to become aware of what unconscious bias is. And we felt that it was so important that we actually started at our board of directors level. We cascaded then from the board to our executive leadership team, and then we're continuing to drive that throughout our entire employee base. So it's been a really impactful training, both to create an awareness and an understanding, and again, just continuing to open up discussions. Speaking of opening up discussions, we've also had open forums related to how we think about engaging our employees in topics such as racism and other critical external social issues, and we're going to continue to do that as well. And finally, one that we're particularly proud of, that we're really just continuing to deepen our journey, is our commitment to supplier diversity. So how do we make sure we're continuing to focus on building a strong relationship, partnership, and pipeline of diverse suppliers for our organization, really to best serve our company as well as our customers and our partners. Did we lose Greg?
Oh, I'm back. I'm not sure what happened there. Go, Melanie, did you finish up? I'm sorry.
I did, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to stick with you since, my focus is obviously the payments fintech industry. So I'm curious if you think there's specific diversity challenges that are specific to payments, or is it pretty much across all industries? What are your thoughts on that?
So I worked obviously in several different sectors, as I mentioned in the intro. I haven't seen radically different impacts across different sectors. I think we all face the same challenges in terms of, where we are in our journey and our life cycle within the company. Obviously, if it's a larger company that has a long tenure, they tend to have more established programs and core processes across everything that they do, as well as investment. And so it just tends to, the longer you practice this, the more ingrained it is into the fabric of the organization. I think for the payment space, particularly since there has been a lot of different startups, there is still an opportunity for us to continue to create more of an awareness around what D&I is, how it's going to impact our industry, and then how we can become a truly driving force in building inclusion across not only our industry, but also for our customers and our partners that we serve. And when I think about that, especially in the banking industry and the way fintech has really changed the face of the industry, there's some opportunities potentially for some of the products and services that we offer. And when I think of that, Greg, I'm thinking of things like contactless payments, perhaps e-commerce. What are the ways in which we can engage and collectively partner to continue to make an impact in that way, in that particular arena as well?
Okay, great. So, Matt, question for you. How has the events that have happened in the world, I mean, obviously we've all been exposed to those, from the pandemic to racial tensions. How have those issues affected what you've been doing at Discover from a DE&I perspective?
Yeah, I think, Greg, I'd answer that. I think like probably most participants here today, events of last year, especially after George Floyd's murder, really sparked something across the nation. And for us, what it did is it accelerated and it expanded our efforts. Right? You look at both of those. We created what is now, we call our DE&I office. So I, kind of top 30 person in the company, am 100% dedicated to that. We promoted a chief diversity officer and have a vice president level role that is 100% dedicated to that. We've invested more in our internal, coming into this year, significantly more in our internal for training and for development programs. And we're investing significantly materially externally as well as we look at that next horizon. And glad to kind of hear Melanie speak about that same thing. How do we take our products and use not just do good business, but do more good with them along the way? And then I would say the second thing that events of last year, and probably even in combination with the pandemic, we've learned to listen better. And I think we've had some really profound personal development and movement, especially in our senior leadership ranks, just by listening more and getting good at having kind of critical conversations where we can really listen to our colleagues and their lived experiences that are vastly different than many of our own. And certainly that started with our Black colleagues and spurred on a hunger for many to dig in and learn. And so we were able to provide a ton of resource for people to go on their own personal learning journeys, which was great. And then throughout the subsequent months of last year, listening to working parents and what they were having to deal with kind of virtual school, and then listening to those who are living solo through the pandemic, right, and unique challenges and stressors that they have, and how do our policies, our practices, and just our culture support them better. And obviously, most recently, our Asian American and Pacific Islander colleagues as well. So, to me, it really strengthened kind of muscle that's going to be super powerful for us going forward.
Great, thanks. It certainly has been a lot of things to listen for in the last year or so. So, Kim, turning to you, in your experience, what have been the most successful DE&I programs that you've been involved with?
Yeah, so in my experience, DEI is not a people, team, or HR initiative. It really is a way of being, and it needs to be deeply rooted in the culture. And I've found the most successful DEI programs come from grassroots efforts led by the employers, similar to some of the examples that have already been shared. But two examples I would share is at my last company, last year during the social injustice, a team of people really formed and jumped in head first. And they really drove all aspects of the dialogue and the education. And it was so powerful to see a team mobilize, guide the entire organization in the needed discussion. And there was so much power in the personal storytelling by employees that really brought the issues of the world to life and really raised awareness to a whole different level. And I think that you said it well. This last year has changed the way we will operate forever and the conversations that we'll have. And another example where really it came from within was really on the recruiting side. we were trying to hire more women engineers, and it really weren't getting that much traction. And it wasn't until one of our engineering leads publicly voiced his dismay at a town hall on the lack of women engineers on the team, did the whole team fully lean in and focus on hiring. And we really moved the needle and went from like 5% women to 15% in a 1-year period, just because there was people were engaged in the process. So that's what I would say is it can't be an HR initiative. It needs to be led by employees.
Okay. So the next question, Kim, I'm going to stay with you. It's kind of a 3-part question. Really, part of this I've also brought out in a lot of the podcasts are, what are some of the best practices and trends in DE&I? And then, when you implement those initiatives, even the ones you've talked about, how do you know they're successful? And you did mention a metric there, which is great. Are there metrics that everyone tracks, and sort of a little bit about that? And then finally, are there things specific to payments that maybe we're not doing as an industry that maybe we should be within, those best practices? So sort of 3 parts: best practices, metrics, and then kind of broader industry type answer. That'd be great.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've seen that really worked well by our company was we really put a leadership development program in place. Can you guys hear me, Cam? I'm getting a little feedback.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out a little bit.
I'm sorry, guys. Well, one of the things I've seen in my last organization that worked really well was that we put a leadership development program in place to promote women in leadership positions. And we really targeted developing their skills and capabilities. And we actually established like a chief of staff role for our most senior leaders in the organization. We started small with maybe 1 or 2 chief of staff roles where we put top talent women into. And they were basically groomed and mentored by these leaders. And then their next role was in a significant leadership position. And it really just allowed women leaders to get more exposure, mentoring, and ultimately into bigger roles down the road. And what was really interesting about that is years later, the company that I was at was sold. And I watched on LinkedIn these women that were part of this leadership program and part of these chief of staff roles. And I mentioned the chief of staff role started small, but then as we started to see that it really helped develop women, we added, I think there was at least 10 chief of staff kinds of roles supporting our general managers. And over time, I watched these women on LinkedIn, and I'm so proud to see how they've grown. And there's at least 5 of these women that were in the program that are now CEOs. So it's really a testament into, if you focus on building women in leadership and giving them opportunities, then they will thrive. So in terms of the industry, the fintech industry, from what I can see, being a newbie here, it's not that different from other industries in terms of stats. When you see the population of the world is virtually 50-50 in terms of gender, and this industry we're definitely lagging behind in this industry and everywhere in terms of women in leadership. We're also lagging in terms of Hispanic and Black representation across teams. So those are areas where we definitely need to focus. I think it's just being more intentional. I talked about the example I gave. It was really being intentional about women in leadership, around hiring, developing, and promoting. And that's what I would say is going to move the needle in this industry.
Okay. So Matt, same question for you.
Sure. So I'll take that out. So first, kind of what are some of the trends and best practices? I think we've talked a lot about what some of those things are, and so at Discover, I feel like, we're catching up on some of those best practices, our talent acquisition practices. I think here we've talked about blind resumes, we've talked about diverse candidate slates, diverse interview panels, et cetera, unconscious bias training. Some of the other things that we're doing, though, I think are a little more novel, and I do hope they become best practice. I hope, we can stand up on stage and talk about our pay equity program, and we can clearly say that we've worked really hard to study this, and we know that women and people of color are paid between 99 cents and $1.02 for every dollar that a white man makes in a role. But we can't say that with that same level of surety on our hiring practices, on our promotion practices, on our retention practices, the things that are so critical for us to reach the diversity goals that we have. And so I hope that that's something we can do and prove out and share with others as well. And then also those external impact, right? That focus on how can companies, the payments industry is great, right? It's a ton of fun. Like I said, I for 14 years worked in our payments business. One thing I always described, folks, is like, it's good business, a fun business, a lot of great, hard driving business people, not the most altruistic, business group in the world, but that can change. Right? I think we all need to move in that direction. So I know I'm kind of jumping ahead to the third answer. We all need to focus on kind of that impact. How can we do good business and do more good along the way? The question around do we know if it's working? What metrics do we have? So I certainly outlined above where we have our North Star goals. We have some very specific measures along the way. But I think it's critical to talk about DE&I is something that deserves as much of a management system as any other business strategy that you have. And it deserves kind of the rigor of that as well. So we have our lead and our lag measures and a management system that really tracks our progress against that. So if we take, for example, 50% female, 40% people of color in our top 500 leadership team, those are our lag measures. Those, we don't do that, right? That's an outcome that we get. What are our lead measures? What are the things that we think if we do, we will get that outcome? And then we track rigorously. Are our activities moving the dial on those lead measures? Are we seeing correlation between the things we think will get us the outcome we're looking for and what we're measuring those lead? And then once we're getting movement on those lag measures, are we ending up with the environment, the culture that we were really looking for and hoping for? And so I think that kind of rigorous management system is required for DE&I as well. And again, I touched a little bit about what I think as an industry we can do better. But I think I would also emphasize that DEI is a business imperative. It's not just good, it's just not right. But it really is a business imperative. And I spent a lot of time internally talking about this, right? That the United States is becoming more diverse more quickly than anyone anticipated, right? I know we'll see the results of the most recent census soon, but by all accounts, the last decade will have been the first one in which we see a shrinking white population. So this is the future. These are our customers in the future. This is our workforce in the future. We've got to figure this out and figure it out now. So we want to understand our customers, serve them well, build products that they want. This is a business imperative, not just a sideline event, not just the right thing to do.
Okay, great. So Melanie, same three questions over.
Sure, and I'll bounce around a little bit, but when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, I think about it from the sentiment of how does it become part of the DNA of your company. We always talk about that internally, and it starts with tone at the top. And when I look at our board of directors and the diversity that we have on our board of directors, both from a gender perspective as well as ethnicity perspective, we have a very diverse board here at WEX. I also think about our leadership team, which is almost 50-50 between males and females across that. In fact, our CEO is a female, which Greg and you and I have talked a lot about. And it does change the tone within the organization. And so when the events unfolded over the course of the last year, we were very well positioned because we already felt it was a business imperative, as you mentioned before, Matt. How did we make sure that diversity, equity, inclusion was really an important concept? And then how do we inspect what we expect in terms of what does it mean at this company? And there's a few different things that we do. One is a global cultural audit. And so what we actually did was we evaluated and assessed our programs and our processes and got the sentiment of our employees around the world and talked about, one, is our culture still reflective of who we think we are? And two, what could we do to get better? And so the voice of the employees has been really important in terms of how we continue to shape and involve our organization. I would say over the last year, the one thing that became loud and clear is that we're actually more inclusive now on a global scale as a result of us working remotely over the past year than we were before. We always had a phenomenal, vibrant culture within the corporate headquarters and within some of our larger offices. But what we wanted to do was make sure that that same exact values and those leadership behaviors were really felt around the world. And that was one way that we could infect it. And in fact, we didn't realize until we all went remote in terms of what that actually meant for our employees and how much of an impact it meant to have a sense of belonging regardless of where you sit and in how you experience WEX personally. And so that's been one of the driving forces. The other piece too, just from a metrics perspective, we've done quite a few focus groups around, again, the sentiment in the organization. We've also looked at our metrics around what is our recruitment processes, how are we looking at our diverse slates, how are we thinking about our compensation practices, and actually conducted several rigorous assessments in terms of where we fall today. And I think we're really proud of the progress we've made. We have more work to do. I think most companies do. It's never an end game. There's always more work to be done. And so I think we take the mindset of this is a marathon, not a sprint, meaning we need to just create it and make it be part of our day in, day life processes, practices, and the way we do business. Then it starts to become part of our regular dialogue. It doesn't feel like a new initiative. In fact, it shouldn't feel like a new initiative. At some point, we should be talking about this is business as usual. This is part of our strategic plan, just like we do our strat plan for our business and for HR on an annual basis. This should be not even a surprise. This should be something we always do.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Melanie. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and we already have one question. So I think I'm going to just open it up for other questions. I don't know, Matt, if you can see the question, but it says, can you share a few examples of leading indicators you're tracking?
Sure. So the one that I mentioned just a second ago, is just what is the percent of diverse slates that we have? What's the percent of diverse interview panels that we have in terms of, lag measure around diversity? A lead measure that we would have around inclusion when we talk about, again, that ability to hold kind of those two things, right? Uniqueness, I can be unique and I can feel a sense of belonging and opportunity. And so a lead measure that we would have there is just the number of participants that we have in some of those critical conversations, those listening sessions, right? So we want to make sure that we're giving enough opportunity for folks both to have their voices heard and for others to again listen to others' lived experiences. So just two examples.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, while we wait to see if anything pops up, I'm going to ask Melanie a question here because it's something I asked on the podcast as well, and I think it's important. I mean, the three of you work in relatively larger organizations, and obviously there's a lot of startups and smaller companies in the space. So Melanie, what advice would you give to a company who doesn't have the resources that you have, and even the people and the financial resources? Like, how would you tell them to get started? What should they do? Where should they go? How would you advise them on sort of taking that first step?
Sure. It's a question I always love to get because regardless of the size of your company, I don't think any organization would say they have the full budget or resources that they want to dedicate to this. But I think starting with a plan, really understanding from an employee perspective what's most important. And I think, Greg, I had mentioned to you before, what's going to resonate for that particular organization. It's not one size fits all. It's not an article that you can read and then apply back into your organization. It needs to meet the needs of your employees specifically, as well as your culture. And so starting small is critically important. The other, I'll say the mistake I see individuals make at times is if they don't have a nice strategic roadmap, and it doesn't need to be hard, it can be what are the 1 to 3 things that I want to accomplish. What ends up happening is they start to chase a lot of whatever the newest fad in the marketplace is. And sometimes those can be distractors for your employees. They can be deterrents for the business. And they also don't help you gather momentum. So if you pick 1 or 2 things and do them extremely well, and I think Kim mentioned engaging your employee base as enablers, that's the most important way you can go. You don't need a ton of money to start. You just need passion and momentum. to get it started. And I would say don't wait. Start somewhere and just continue to just fine tune and improve your processes and programs over time. They can be simple, and your employees will jump on the bandwagon for this.
Right. So Matt or Kim, either of you have anything to add to that?
I would agree. I've been to 2 startup companies with, not a ton of resources, and you start small, set goals, like you said, Melanie. I think that's great, and involve the employees and make it a priority. It is the way of the world for the future of running your business, and I think the leaders set the tone on that. So I think between start small, leaders set the tone, and then get employees involved, I think if you do those 3 things, you'll have success.
Matt, anything to add?
My 2 colleagues nailed it here. So.
Great. So there's a couple of questions that have come in. We've got a little bit of time left. So let's see if we can address those. Katie asked, would any of you be able to share what your method or platforms for D&I training you are using? Does anybody want to jump on that one? So I don't know if that, I think maybe, go ahead.
Sorry, just real quick. Our kind of enterprise-wide deliberate advocate, we just released an e-learning that was all internally developed, obviously with our own talent development group. We've engaged Korn Ferry to help us at the top of the house with our most senior leaders. Korn Ferry has what I think is world-class content and coaches. They're going to help us with that segment of our leadership team.
Okay. Yeah, let me ask this one last question, and then we're going to jump to our breakout sessions. I think this is important. Has there been a focus on the intersection of mental health and inclusion? Employees from diverse backgrounds feel a lack of representation, microaggression,